Do you say what often in conversations so you have time to understand what has been said? Do you use closed captioning because you can read and process text faster than you can process speech? Then you may be experiencing auditory processing difficulties. Hey, Define Yourselfer. I am the Confident Autistic from theconfidentautistic.com. I am an autistic adult, late diagnosed, and a multi certified life coach on a mission to empower you to embrace autism confidently. You can show your support for my mission by liking, commenting, and sharing this video, or by subscribing to this channel. When you subscribe, do not forget to ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted and when I go live for a weekly Q&A live stream. Processing difficulties are considered very common among autistic adults, with studies suggesting that a significant majority, potentially up to 80%, of individuals with autism experience some degree of atypical sound processing. Now, for many of us, auditory processing difficulties often manifest as hypersensitivity to certain sounds or difficulty understanding speech in noisy environments. This is often referred to as sensory processing issue within our community. Now, while prevalent, not every autistic person with auditory processing difficulties will receive a formal diagnosis of auditory processing disorder, which is also known as APD. Auditory processing difficulties in autism refers to a common challenge where those of us on the autism spectrum struggle to interpret and understand sounds, even if we can hear them clearly, often manifesting as difficulty filtering background noise, following conversations in noisy environments, or distinguishing between similar sounds. Now, how does auditory processing difficulties challenge us? Auditory processing difficulties is not simply a hearing problem, but a difficulty in the brain's ability to process auditory information. Auditory processing difficulties makes it hard for us to process speech effectively. Essentially, our brains have trouble making sense of what we hear despite having normal hearing abilities. Auditory processing difficulties is sensitivity to noise. Many of us on the spectrum experience hypersensitivity to certain sounds, finding everyday noises overwhelming or distracting, which can cause us to experience difficulties when trying to process information that we are receiving from others. Auditory processing difficulties challenges our ability to comprehend speech, especially in noisy environments, which can lead to communication difficulties. Auditory processing difficulties can impact our ability to interact with others socially by making it harder to follow conversations and to participate in social situations or social gatherings. Some examples of auditory processing difficulties for autistic adults like you and me include difficulty understanding rapid speech. For some of us, we struggle to follow conversations where people talk real quickly. And I know some of us on the spectrum, we our speech pattern is we talk real quickly. I know I'm one of those people. When I worked in radio, oh man, I hate to admit this, about 40 years ago, the one thing I heard in almost every evaluation of my on-air performance is, you got to slow down. I always talk too fast. I don't know why, but I do. That's just a part of me. And I'm working on that because I want to make sure these videos are going to be accessible and Again, I'm not putting anyone down, but where everyone can understand what I'm saying, and I'm not speaking too fast where I lose you in these videos. I know some I've done that in, and I am working on that. I like to be transparent with y'all, so I am working on that, and I hope that my efforts in this will make the videos easier for everyone, whether you have APD or not, to understand what I'm communicating and for you to gain some knowledge about autism through these videos. Now, another example of how APD impacts us as autistic adults is APD can cause distraction from background noise. Now, being easily distracted by ambient sound like classroom chatter or traffic noise can be a part of APD. Now, I've had this most of my life. I get distracted by background noise all the time, and it's a double edged sword for me. First of all, I always thought that was more of an ADHD trait because I was not focusing. I was always checking what that background noise was. But the benefit of that is when I worked in radio, I had a keen sense of hearing, and this is how it can be a superpower, that while I'm talking to someone or listening to an on air, when I'm running on air, I can listen to things in the background to listen to cues or whatever I need to get the next, part of the program on the air for the listeners. So, we talk about in other videos that autism can be a superpower. Right there, that's a superpower. It's a double edged one because at times it's a curse because it causes you to be distracted by background noise. But other times it can be a blessing because you may hear things that you may need to know about. And maybe you're not working in radio, but you could be having a conversation with someone. And this happens to me all the time. And my hearing, I think, is a little bit more acute or finely tuned because I'm visually impaired. While we're driving down the road, my wife and I can have a conversation, a radio on. I can hear a siren coming. And yeah, it distracts me, but I often can hear it and relay that information to the driver before they can hear it so we can be prepared to look around for where the lights are and take appropriate action when we're traveling. So again, I'm sharing this with you not to boast my ego, but to show how some of our traits can be superpowers. And we should not look at autism as a negative experience or as a curse. Many of us who are late diagnosed, this whole thing about being on the spectrum, even though we've been on it all of our lives, is new to us and we think we're defective. We're not. We have different abilities. We can do anything anyone else can. We may have to take a different route. That's what I say all the time. Now, another example of APD for autistic adults is misinterpreting sounds. Not being able to differentiate between similar sounds that we hear. I can't really give you a great example of that, but you know, you're hearing a train sound. Is that a train or is that a tornado coming? Now, obviously, if it's a clear sunny day, it's probably a train, but not being able to tell the difference between certain sounds, that can happen. And this can happen in speech as well. We may hear certain things a different way than they were actually spoken because we're misinterpreting the sounds that we are hearing. Additionally, a our final example that I have for you today of what auditory processing disorder for autistic adults may look like is oversensitive to certain sounds. Now, when we become oversensitive, which we can call sensory overload from sound or noise, we tend to cover our ears or showing distress at sounds that seem normal to others. There's obviously you get sensory overload if it's really crowded. There's a program my wife loves watching, and it's not a bad program. I enjoy it too, called Emergency. It was on in the 70s on NBC. I think it ran from 70s to 78, but I could be wrong. It used to be on Saturday nights at 8, 7 Central. I sound like I swallowed a TV announcer, don't I? Okay, anyway, let's get back to what I want to talk about here. And there's a particular episode where they go into this area where there's some hazmat in it, and there's this loud bing, bing, a siren type sound. which is needed so people know you need to get out, evacuate, hazmat, this could be very dangerous. And this scene runs for a couple of minutes, and that high-pitched sound of that alarm going off doesn't bother my wife that much, or most people. To well, beyond the point knowing danger, But for me, it's like almost painful, and I was oversensitive to that. So I've asked my wife when she watches this, okay, episode, okay, if I'm in the office, got the door closed, I don't care. But there are times she will watch it in the living room at night, and I went to bed. And even though she turns down the volume, I can still hear that sound. And I'm just so sensitive to it, it causes me pain. That's like, ugh. So I've asked her if you can watch that episode during the day, because at night it will wake me up and it really stresses me out. And she's been very accommodating about that. I have to give her that. Now it's your turn. Do you experience trouble with APD, Auditory Processing Disorder? Share your experiences, or if you have any questions about APD. I read every single comment that is posted in the comment section underneath this video, and I reply to as many as possible. Now, don't forget to check out the show notes, where you can find in our resource area of the show notes directions on how you can get your free copy of 31 affirmations to help you embrace autism confidently. So until next time, this is the Confident Autistic, aka Chris Mitchell, reminding you that now is the time for you to embrace autism confidently. Join me live Thursday nights for the Confident Autistic Live, where I answer your questions, we discuss this week's videos, offer support, and more. The fun starts Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time in the US of A. Be sure to click the bell when you subscribe to the channel to be notified when the party begins.